Welcome back, guys. Today is going to be a special day because we're going ahead and talking more on FRT builds, in this case the WOT inside of our CMMG Banshee 300 Blackout. A lot of you guys were geeking out over how slow it runs with subsonic ammunition or how fast and nice it runs with supersonic ammunition. Y'all wanted to know how we got that to be able to be done, and I wanted to tell you, but before I do, let me tell you about today's sponsor. Now, this channel doesn't get monetized too often, so we do rely on folks that reach out to us and want to work with us and help us make content for you. Today, one of those companies is Armaspec Tactical Advantage. They are a US-based company that makes things like lower parts kits, safety selectors like we have here, our 45-degree throw fulcrum safety. It's kind of nice and clicky, and it's got a little bit of a tactile bump so that you can grab it from multiple angles. They also make things like charging handles, in the case of our Victory charging handle that we featured here on this build as well. And they make things like silent recoil systems or silent capture systems for your buffer. We'll throw some up on the screen, but the benefit of why I want to talk to you about this is one of the important things about getting a FRT, WOT, super safety, whatever it may be, and to operate efficiently or operate actually at all is a little bit of tuning. Now, with their SRS system, you actually get the kit, or if you buy the kit, you're going to get a carbine, an H1, and an H2 buffer, all included in the package, and they look a little bit like this. Now, with the FRT system, if you start noticing things like light primer strikes, you need to go a little bit heavier, because the general rule for that is as your bolt slams forward and the firing pin drops, you get what's called bolt bounce, because it's a little bit too light. So it bounces forward and bounces back just enough that you see the primer strike on the back of your round and nothing happens. So then you're cycling the gun, looking at the back of the round, and that's when you'll realize it. Now, with the SRS system, it is a two-stage system, so it has two springs built into it. This is so that when it's inside of your gun, you don't get any noise, and when you're shooting the gun, you actually get a softer recoil impulse, as well as a more quiet system. Because after all, if we're gonna spend all the money for tack stamps and suppressors, why not take care of something that doesn't require a tack stamp that can reduce your noise and footprint by just a little bit? Now, housing all of this, they do also make a PDW style stock. Now, I'm not too big of a fan of this, but I know some guys out there really like the PDW style systems. It's a fast deploy, whenever I do it correctly, but it's also a fast conceal when you're ready to get going. The benefit of this system is it does work with any buffer tube that you already have. It works real nice on a pistol buffer tube, by the way. But with this Geisley one, we get a little bit of a gap there. Something you need to note that I found out on something like, say, the CMMG Banshees that have the ambi sling mounts on the bottom. If you've got the ambi sling connections at the bottom of your actual plate, you're not going to be able to get this to go in, so bear that in mind if you're looking for this option. Now, the other thing I do want to point out is the stock is actually a little bit heavier than most options out there because it's made out of heavy-duty aluminum. But if none of that really bothers you, it's a cool system and it looks really good on the gun. Because after all, we do know that being tactical is looking tactical. At least that's half the battle. Doesn't matter about functionality from the opinions of some people. But speaking of functionality, guys, you really do have to work hard on getting your WOTs or your FRTs or your super safes to be able to run in a manner that looks like you see out here in the YouTube universe. I've spent a lot of time tuning, and today we're going to talk about the update on the FRT case, and we're going to show you a little bit of the WOT in action. Let's go. So one of the benefits of actually tuning your system to make it kind of have a different rate of fire, or basically how I call it, operating on borderline anemia, is that we get a real controllable firearm. That's a lot of the reasons the guys that are running full autos, things like M16s, they're using a rifle buffer system. So they're going to an A5 system from Voltar, which adds a lot of weight to your buffer. Now, in our case, whenever we're running subsonic ammunition, we've got to use the lightest of the lightest, the lightest of the springs, and then we've got our gas block set to be able to be just anemic enough with this light system that it runs nice. Then we just change our buffer weight system and spring to be able to shoot nice and controllable when we're doing supers. So let's go ahead and see just how we're able to group with subsonic ammunition with just 5 rounds and a WOT trigger onto a fresh target. Well, honestly, it's not great, but not terrible. I mean, we're shooting at a very comfortable pace of fire. We're still having to control for the bumpity that's happening on your finger, and we're still leaning into it. And honestly, we're all but one is inside the A zone, so pretty happy with that. So let's go ahead and see how we can do with supersonic ammunition. But before we do that, remember, we need to go ahead and change to both a heavier buffer, as well as we're going to change to a braided buffer spring provided by Armaspec. All right, guys, so we've gone ahead and switched out to 147 Federal, 300 Blackout, and these are gonna have a little bit more scream to them, but they're also gonna have a little bit more kick. Now, I know that a lot of you guys may think you've got an adjustable gas block, which we're running the Superlative Arms adjustable gas block on here. It's stock from CMMG on their Banshee 300 series. But the thing about it is, it's a little bit more difficult to actually adjust this than you would imagine, because we've got the suppressor here, it's tucked down here, we need a long Allen key, and sometimes it gets carbon locked. So the faster solution, instead of tuning my gas each time, is to tune it for both scenarios. And then we just fiddle fart with buffer weights and springs and things of that nature. So now that we've replaced it down to the braided spring from Armaspec, and we went ahead and put an H1 from Geisley inside of it, let's see how we do as far as grouping goes and just see how it runs. Going hot. So again, first shot was dead center of the C zone. Then I started pulling because recoil was taken over very, very quickly, and we started dragging down a little bit. And by the time we got to that fifth round, we were just outside of A zone into the C zone area, or I guess that's B zone technically. So not too bad. But that just shows you that we can have a gun that's tuned for both just by making a few adjustments. So, you know, maybe it's worth keeping a couple extra springs and weights, or perhaps just go and get an adjustable system. Now, I do want to point one thing out, because we are running a law folder. The SRS from Armaspec are not compatible with law folders, because as we saw when we were doing our little demonstration, you have a protrusion that has to come out and go inside your bolt carrier group in order to function. So if you're running a law folder, you want to stay away from the adjustable. That's why we're using the braided spring on this, and that's what we had to just go ahead and use traditional springs. So let's go ahead and now talk about why we're able to currently use an FRT trigger and why you might be able to again very soon. So guys, this is where it gets to the boring part of the video, but a very important part to talk about, because a lot of you out there may be saying, oh no, what is he doing? That's illegal. You're gonna go to jail. You better guard your dog. Sorry, doggo. It's not a good look if you don't understand the legality behind what's going on with the FRT case. So there hasn't been a lot of updates, and there hasn't been a lot posted to social media about what's going on, but let's do a quick recap so that you can understand why we're still able to use FRTs without fear of the bang bang on the doggo to unalive, right? So back in October, when NAGR was in the court system with FRTs, with rare breed firearms, and they were fighting Big Gov or the ATF, essentially what happened was they were able to present enough evidence that said, we're going to win this case, and there was enough risk to the public, i.e. our dogs and people being shot by the ATF or people being unalived by the ATF, if we go ahead and rule these as illegal. The judge sided with NAGR and Rare Breed and said, you know what, you're absolutely right. There is a significant risk if we don't stop this right now that the ATF could, in fact, do more harm to the public than keeping FRTs on the streets. So what happened is the judge went ahead and issued what's called a preliminary injunction. So back in October, when the preliminary injunction was granted, it covered all NAGR members. Now, they did try to get it as a nationwide injunction. However, those were pretty rare. And so being named on the plaintiff party was the best we could do. And in this case, all you needed to be was a supporting member for the NAGR prior to the injunction getting given, which is back in October of 2023, in order to be part of the party. Now, they've made some gray area statements that say, well, you know, if you support NAGR after the fact, you're still technically a member of the party, and you're going to have protection if the ATF do the door knock and try to shoot doggo of you. Now, whether or not it actually happens, and if the ATF goes to doors again, which they did, and NAGR was there to follow back and say, hey, what are you doing here, guys? You can't talk to these people. They're part of a protected class. You know, that's still be determined if that's a future worry. But for right now, there was not really a lot of talk about what's happened since. Well, there was a motion for summary judgment that was requested, which basically means, you know, we've presented enough. You've granted us the preliminary injunction. Will you go ahead and make a decision on this and go ahead and rule in our favor, because that's what we want to hear. Well, ATF put some paperwork forward and they kind of fought that for a little bit. And then, of course, the ATF decided to file in the Court of Appeals for the injunctive relief that was given to the members. Now, this goes back just a few weeks ago. In April, the appeals court actually ruled and said, ATF, no, it's still granted that the plaintiffs have their injunctive relief, because even the appeals court sided with the FRT not being a machine gun and damages to the public being significant if the ATF gets their way to claim that it is. So this was a huge win that's not currently being talked about, but we wanted to bring it to light because this is progress. So that brings us to the next point, which is, can you own one? Well, absolutely you can own one. They're not machine guns, right? Well, as long as you're a member of the protected class, aka if you were a member of the NAGR prior to October, or if you're currently one of their supporting members, you are a named plaintiff, and theoretically on that, you are protected. This allows you to both buy, sell, trade, and possess and use forced reset triggers, which are named as the FRT 15 from Rare Breed Firearms, as well as the WOT from that company that we're not going to give any light to. However, you cannot go to a gun store and buy them commercially as of yet, because that's still kind of being regulated. Now, the next question a lot of folks are going to ask is, what happens if we do win the overall case? Well, right now we're waiting to go to an actual hearing in front of a judge panel to basically say, you know, this is going to be what's decided. So that's the next step. Or the judge could just issue a summary judgment that says, you know, this is what I sided with. However, we do feel it's probably going to be heard by a court. Now, once that's won and they say, okay, FRT, not a machine gun. Well, of course, ATF's going to appeal that. It's going to go back to the appeals court for the final verdict. Appeals court, hopefully then, is going to kick it right back, say we still side with the judgment at the district court level. Then once all of this is in place, there's still one lingering case that really hasn't been discussed. This is in the case of New York State versus Rare Breed Firearms or Lawrence DeMonico, because that case is a civil suit that basically states tax fraud in the event that these were machine guns and Lawrence manufactured these machine guns, and then Lawrence sold these machine guns, and then all of a sudden there was no taxes paid and all these transfers were happening and no transfer tax was given. And so they're suing Rare Breed in the tune of millions and millions of dollars in back taxes, plus interest, plus fees, plus liabilities. So that's currently still in the case. And while that's happening, there is an injunctive relief granted to the state against Lawrence that prohibits him from being involved in any commercial activities and how it relates to FRTs. So step one, we win the district court case in the state of Texas right now, and we get a permanent injunction granted as a result. Step two, we win the absolute coming afterwards appeals case that will then happen with the ATF, which we already won the first one. And when that happens, step three, they take the precedence that the FRT is not a machine gun and they destroy the case in New York that says it is a machine gun and that taxes are owed, because no taxes are owed if there is no machine gun. If the glove doesn't fit, then you must acquit, right? That's relevant right now. But nevertheless, guys, once they can then overturn that civil case in New York, Rare Breed will then be open for business and FRTs will be flowing freely. Now, one last thing I do want to discuss is the super safes, because right now, guys, you're not super safe if you're running a super safe, and I do advise that you just go ahead and take that 3D printing, chunk it, burn it, whatever, but get a little bit of distance away from it. And I'm not siding with the ATF to say the super safe is a machine gun. In fact, with the way it operates, I would dare say that the super safe is more of a semi than the FRT is a semi, just saying that very loosely here. But in reality, because of the one company that was rated by the ATF, said they were machine guns, and then that one company's like, oh, you know what, you're right, we didn't know better, we're so sorry, here, take all of our inventory, take our records, take everything, and we're just gonna walk away from this. They did not fight the ATF, which tells the ATF they now have precedence that the super safe is in fact a machine gun by public opinion, and that is going to hurt the case should it ever go to a court system. So you don't want to be on the receiving end of that, because it's not your face you want to see in jail for 10 years with that $10,000 fine if caught in a violation of an unregistered machine gun, guys. So avoid the super safes right now, indeed, but FRTs, if you're a member of the NHER, and we sure hope you are, we're going to leave a link in the comment section or in the details below for you to be able to click and join the fight against the ATF for the National Associations for Gun Rights. They really need our support right now as the court legal battles just keep getting bigger and bigger as the 2A keeps coming under attack. So guys, go give them a support. Start a monthly contribution, an annual contribution, or a one-time contribution. Just send them a cup of coffee via a $5 donation, just something to help the cause. But if you join and get that membership as little as $35 per year, you are under a protected class and you have a big fighter on your back, basically, to help you fight the government in the event that they come for your 2A rights. So guys, that's all I had for you today. If you have FRT questions, leave them in the comments section below. I'd love to hear them. If you want to talk about 300 blackout and how it runs, we'll talk about that too. But till next time, guys, stay safe, avoid the super safe, and enjoy your FRTs, guys.